Most people think of Elvis and they see the gold suit, they see the swiveling hips. They hear the rock and roll anthems that made the world shake. They think of Las Vegas, the white jumpsuit, the screaming crowds. He was the king, an icon, a symbol of rebellion, and then of spectacular success. His music was about love, dancing, good times. It was blue suede shoes and hound dogs. It was fun, but there was another side. A darker side, a part of him that understood sorrow, loss, and the hollow ache of fame. This side didn't show up often. It wasn't the side that sold millions of records or movie tickets. But when it did, it was powerful. It was real. And in 1969, a year he was reclaiming his throne, he recorded a song so bleak, so utterly heartbreaking, it felt less like a pop record and more like a funeral dirge. It was a story of a dream that died in the worst possible way. The inspiration wasn't a work of fiction. It wasn't a clever idea cooked up by a professional songwriter in a sterile office. It came from a real place, a real story, or at least a story that was told as if it were real. A piece of American folklore passed from person to person until it found its way into a song. And that song found its way to a man who understood its message in his bones. The story starts in a small town. You know the kind. A place where everyone knows your name, your parents' names, and what you had for dinner last night. A place of dusty roads and slow, humid afternoons on the front porch. Life there is simple. It's predictable. For some, that's a comfort. For others, it's a cage. In one of these towns, there was a girl. Spark. She was bright. She had a spark. She was the one everyone said was destined for more. She dreamed of the big city, of bright lights, of a life that wasn't mapped out for her from the day she was born. She saw the magazines, she heard the radio, and she knew, with the certainty only the young can have, that her future was somewhere else. Not here. Not in this quiet, sleepy place where tomorrow was always the same as yesterday. Her family was proud, and they were scared. Her mother worried. Her father just nodded, his face a mask of quiet concern. They knew the world outside their town was big and unforgiving, but you can't hold back a bird that needs to fly. So they let her go. Before she left, standing on that familiar porch, she made a promise. It was a promise to them, but also to herself. She told her parents, her friends, everyone who gathered to see her off, that she was going to make it. She was going to be a star. She was going to be rich and famous. And she told them how they would know she had succeeded. One day, she said, "You'll see a big fancy car pull up right here. A long, black limousine. And when you see it, you'll know I've come back home. I'll step out of that car, and I'll be wearing a beautiful dress. I'll be a success." It was a beautiful image. A powerful promise. That limousine became a symbol for the whole town. It was hope on four wheels. It represented the idea that one of their own could break free, could conquer the world, and return a hero. Every time a nice car passed through, people would look up, just for a second, wondering if it was her. Years passed. Letters became less frequent, the town kept on being a town, people got older. The world changed, but not much changed there. Her promise, though, it hung in the air. A ghost of a dream. The story then shifts. It moves from the quiet hope of the country to the brutal reality of the city. We don't know the details of her life there. The song doesn't tell us. That's part of its power. It leaves a void, and your mind fills it with the worst possibilities. Did she try to become a singer? Well, an actress. Did she get close? Did she fail spectacularly? The city is a machine. It can build you up, but it can also grind you down. It's a place of incredible opportunity and crushing loneliness. You can be surrounded by a million people and feel completely alone. She was a small-town girl with a big dream. She was one of thousands. The city is full of them. They arrive every day on buses and trains, their eyes full of stars. Many of them find out the stars are just streetlights reflecting in puddles of dirty water. We can imagine her struggle. The cheap apartments, the dead-end jobs, the constant rejection. The slow, creeping realization that the dream was much harder than she ever imagined. Maybe she made compromises, maybe she fell in with the wrong people, maybe she just got tired. The sparkle in her eyes might have dimmed. The confident girl who made the promise on the porch might have slowly faded away, replaced by someone harder, sadder, more cynical. The tragedy of her story is the silence. The years when the town heard nothing. They were left to wonder. Was she okay? Did she make it? Did she just forget about them? The not knowing can be its own kind of torture. Her parents looked at her empty room, the silence a constant reminder of their daughter out in the big, scary world. The promise of the limousine felt more and more like a child's fantasy. Then, one day, the promise was kept. A car appeared at the end of the long, dusty road leading into town. It was just as she had described. It was big, it was fancy, it was a long, black limousine. Heads turned, people came out of their houses. A murmur went through the town. She's back. She did it. She's finally come home. Her parents stood on the porch, the same porch where they had said goodbye. Their hearts were pounding, a mix of joy, relief, and years of pent-up anxiety. The car drove slowly, majestically. It was a spectacle. It was everything she had promised. It pulled up right in front of the house. The crowd gathered. They were quiet now, waiting. Waiting to see their hometown hero, the girl who had escaped and won. The driver, a man in a crisp suit, got out. He didn't smile. He walked around to the back of the car. He opened the door. But she didn't step out. There was no wave to the crowd, no triumphant smile, no beautiful dress for a glad occasion. The girl who left full of life did not return that way. The song's narrator is one of the townspeople, maybe an old friend, maybe a former lover. He's standing in that crowd, watching, and he sees it all. He sees the chauffeur open the door. He sees inside, and his heart breaks. He sees her. She's finally home, but she's riding in the back, silent and still. The big limousine, the symbol of her success, was not a limousine at all. It was a hearse. She came home famous, just not in the way anyone wanted. Her name was in the paper, but in the obituaries. The crowd of strangers she ran with in the city, they didn't know her, they didn't care. They just sent her body back home. A final, cold transaction. The fancy gown she bought for a happy day would never be worn. Her dreams of a grand homecoming were realized, but only as a nightmare. The engine of the limousine was the only sound. A low, sad hum. A death rattle. This is the story that two songwriters, Vern Stovall and Bobby George, heard. It struck them with its simple, brutal power. It was a modern American tragedy. A cautionary tale about the price of fame and the danger of chasing dreams. They sat down and wrote it out, simply and directly. They didn't add fancy metaphors or complicated rhymes. They just told the story as if they were the ones standing in that crowd watching that hearse pull up. The song they wrote was a country song. It had a classic country structure, but it was filled with a gothic southern dread. It wasn't about cheating or drinking. It was about death, about the absolute finality of a life cut short. The original version was recorded by a singer named Wynn Stewart in 1967. It was a good version. It was just a sad country song. It didn't have the weight, the gravity that the story deserved. It needed a different voice. A voice that had lived a dream and knew its dark side. 2 years later, in 1969, Elvis Presley walked into American Sound Studio in Memphis. He was a man reborn. He had just come off the massive success of his '68 comeback special. He was finished with the cheesy Hollywood movies and their terrible soundtracks. He was done being a parody of himself. He wanted to make real music again, music with soul, with grit, with meaning. He was back in his hometown working with a legendary producer, Chips Moman, and a band of session musicians who were the best in the business. They called themselves the Memphis Boys. These sessions were historic. They produced some of his greatest recordings, Suspicious Minds, In the Ghetto, Kentucky Rain. He was on fire. He was hungry. He was looking for songs that mattered. Someone brought him the song about the girl in the limousine. He listened to it. And something in that story connected with him on a profound level. You have to understand who Elvis was at that moment. He was the ultimate small-town boy who made it big. He was the kid from Tupelo, Mississippi, who grew up poor and became the most famous person on the planet. He lived the dream the girl in the song had died chasing. He had the big cars, the mansions, the screaming fans. He had it all. But he also knew the cost. He knew the loneliness at the top. He knew what it was like to be surrounded by a crowd of strangers who didn't really know him. He had seen the music industry chew people up and spit them out. He had lost his mother, the anchor of his life. He had spent years in a creative prison in Hollywood. He knew about loss. He knew about promises. He knew what it felt like to be a symbol instead of a person. He saw his own story reflected in that dark ballad. It was a mirror image. He was the one who came home in the fancy car, a success. But what if he hadn't? What if he had been one of the countless others who failed? He felt the girl's story. It was the story of every dreamer. It was the dark side of the American dream. So he decided to record it, and the way he recorded it transformed the song from a sad country tune into a piece of tragic opera. The session started late at night. The mood in the studio was heavy. This wasn't a rock and roll party. This was serious. The band laid down a track that was slow, menacing, and mournful. The bass went and walked like a pallbearer. The drums beat like a slow, tired heart. The piano added droplets of sorrow. Then Elvis stepped up to the microphone. He wasn't the hip-shaking king. He was a storyteller, a griever. He sang the first line, and the room went still. His voice was not the powerful, booming instrument of his rock songs. It was low, full of pain and resignation. He wasn't just singing the words, he was living them. He became the narrator, the boy left behind, watching the tragedy unfold. As the song builds, so does the emotion in his voice. You can hear the anger. Hear anger at the city that destroyed her. Anger at the fickle nature of fame. When he sings the line, "Well, the paper's told of how you lost your life," his voice cracks with rage and grief. It's the sound of a man trying to make sense of a senseless death. He describes the scene with a chilling precision. The blinking of the headlights of the limousine. The crowd of people standing all around. He makes you feel like you were there, on that dusty road, watching this horror. You feel the heat, you feel the suffocating silence of the crowd. The genius of his performance is in the control. He never lets it become overly dramatic. The pain is raw, but it's contained. It's the kind of deep internal grief that doesn't need a scream to be felt. It's in the tremble of a note, the way he bites off a word, the weary sadness that saturates every syllable. The final verse is devastating. He sings about the girl's parents, her father, his head bowed, trying not to cry. Her mother, her face streaked with tears, looking at the fancy gown you bought for a glad occasion. It's such a specific, heartbreaking detail. A dress for a wedding or a party, now a useless piece of fabric in the face of death. A symbol of a future that will never happen. When Elvis finished the take, the story goes that the studio was silent for a long moment. The musicians, seasoned professionals who had seen it all, were stunned. He had poured every ounce of his own experience, his own fears, his own sorrows into that song. He took a simple, tragic story and made it his own. He understood that the long, black car wasn't just a hearse. It was a metaphor for the final, lonely journey that fame can lead you on. The song was released on the album From Elvis in Memphis. It was the first track on side one. It was a statement. This was the new Elvis. This was an artist, not just an entertainer. It was not a single. It was never a radio hit. It was too dark, too depressing. You couldn't dance to it. You couldn't hum it on your way to work. It was a song you listened to in a quiet room, and it made you feel something deep and unsettling. For many fans, it was a shock. They were used to jailhouse rock, not a 7-minute funeral procession. But for those who listened closely, it was a masterpiece. It was proof that beneath the glitter and the fame, there was a man with a profound understanding of the human condition. A man who knew that for every dream that comes true, another one dies on a lonely road. The story that inspired the song is a piece of folklore. Maybe it really happened to one specific girl. Or maybe it's a composite of many such stories. It doesn't really matter. It's true in the way all great stories are true. It speaks to universal fear. The fear of failing, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of our dreams turning against us. The girl in the song wanted to come home a winner. She wanted the limousine to be a symbol of her triumph. Instead, it became a symbol of her tragedy. She kept her promise. She came back in a long black car. But the dream had a terrible twist ending. Elvis Presley understood that twist. He lived a life that was a fairy tale, but he knew how easily it could have been a horror story. He took that knowledge, that fear, and he channeled it into one of the darkest, most haunting performances of his career. He gave a voice to the girl in the story, and to all the forgotten dreamers like her. He made sure her tragic ride home would never be forgotten. The car was long. It was black, it was a limousine, but it was carrying her home to the only place she had left to go, a plot of ground in the local cemetery. The song was Long Black Limousine.